can you all just grow up? Like, I'm sick of seeing tweets of people saying, oh, he didn't want us when we weren't in Europe, but now he did. That's how football works, okay? Hello and welcome back to the Villa Filler podcast. I am here as always with my good friend Dan Wiseman. Dan, it's been a minute since we have both been able to sort of sit up and catch up about the Villa because, you know, the last recordings we've done have been for transfer announcements, which are, of course, are extremely exciting. But as the Onana one sort of revealed, can maybe age like milk, because at the time we recorded it, it looked like it was going to be happening really quickly, and then it sort of dragged on for a week. Hence, this has happened really quickly at the start of that podcast, which we've got hundreds of comments about, as I'm sure you can imagine. But no, there's plenty to discuss today, mate. But before we get into all of that, it's how exciting is it to, first of all, for us to be recording a podcast, Dan? Because again, it's been a minute. But two, there's been so much going on that it makes these sort of bumper-packed Villa Filler episodes like almost worth your while as the viewer, right? You guys are going to get a good Villa Filler today.
Oh, mate. Yeah. First of all, it is fantastic to be back. It's been really weird, like recently. This thing called like life and like a job has really gotten in the way. Like what I didn't sign up for this. I did actually. But it's been really, really good, mate. It has been really, really good. But yeah, I mean, you know, this is the first time that we can truly deliver a Villa. This is filled with probably like, I don't know what, like a week's worth of news that I'm just absolutely desperate to go over. So yeah, to everybody listening, to everybody that's stuck around, we know there's been a bit of a gap. You guys kind of blocked literally in your thousands to the two announcement videos that we put up recently. And so we are obviously, you know, in a time where, you know, the content hasn't exactly been flowing from Dan and I, you guys still wrote up and, you know, put a lot of time into that, which we're both massively appreciative for. And so it feels very good indeed, mate, to finally sit down on a podcast that, you know, we can put out tomorrow, which will touch on all of, like, what are some pretty exciting topics, mate.
Absolutely, mate. Absolutely. And I think we'll start with the departures, mate, or the sort of pending departures. They're sat in the gate, they're waiting for their flight to get out of it. Or I guess in Diaby's case, I think he's already taken his flight and he's been in Saudi Arabia, completing his medical. Al-Ittihad come in, and I think a lot of the fees that have been sort of banded around over the past week and a bit, they seem to have people a little bit confused. I think the fee that was reported that we had paid clearly isn't as high as it was reported, because, you know, a lot of outlets, you know, you've got the Athletic, you've got the Mail, reporting that Villa are essentially doubling their money here with this deal. If my memory serves me correctly, the deal to sign Diaby from Leverkusen was worth up to 50 million euros with add-ons. I believe it was around 34 million up front, and then the rest to be, you know, incremental add-ons. What those are, we are not privy to, because we weren't in the contract negotiations. Sorry, throat's giving up at the wrong time there. But a little bit of suspense. Obviously, we weren't privy to that. But, you know, with a lot of the sort of sources saying that it's varying from like 50 mil to 60 mil. Either way, you're nearly or are doubling your money with this sale, as those add-ons clearly haven't all been met or received for Leverkusen. This, like, I think objectively, this is like the best bit of business that we could do. Like, I think I'm really interested to hear your thoughts on this, mate, because like Musa as a player could be frustrating at times due to the sort of lack of physicality, but I don't think anybody can or should scoff at 9 goals and 9 assists across the Premier League and the Conference League in a debut season, you know, coming over from the Bundesliga. almost an identical scenario to what we saw with Leon Bailey. Struggled in his first season, obviously had injuries as well. And I'm sort of looking at Musa Diaby's profile now, and I'm seeing that there's only a month between me and him, and I'm thinking, bloody hell, if you were to drop me in this Villa team, there's no way I'm achieving anywhere near what he's done. Obviously, a remarkable athlete, a remarkable human. I don't like how a lot of the discourse has sort of been around, people are essentially calling him a bench player. I'm like 95% certain Musa Diaby set a record for the most amount of appearances in a single season by an Aston Villa player, and was not very often on the bench, and tended to play at least 70 minutes of most matches, and looked really dangerous at a lot of different times during the season. And that's not to say that Musa didn't struggle, but I don't like this sort of rewriting of the history, that Diaby was like a make-a-wish kid that stumbled upon Aston Villa, and we granted him a wish to play a season of Premier League football. Obviously, he had his sort of downfalls in his game, which I've sort of highlighted with the physicality and sort of getting used to the league, but he's a more than capable player, which is why, even though I only a minute ago described this as a fantastic piece of business for this deal to go through, I'm extremely conflicted about this. And I think it's only through the lens of PSR and FFP where I can look at it sort of objectively and say, yeah, maybe this is a great deal. Because, as a player, I believe Musa's got way more to offer for Aston Villa in a year, 2 years' time. But obviously, that isn't to be.
Well, I mean, those goals and assists speak for itself. I think it's important to mention, mate, that as you were talking, it's official.
Wow. This is perfect timing, isn't it? Undisclosed I imagine.
Yes, it is. Moose. Well, the Villa haven't announced it as of yet. They may well do so whilst I'm talking now. But yeah, the farewell post has just gone live from Moose's socials, and so yeah, looks like the official announcement will be just around the corner. It's a tricky one. It's a tricky one to know how to feel about this. The first thought that came to my mind when I saw this deal was, if this had happened a month ago, would we have sold Douglas Luiz?
Well, there is
that was the first thought that came to my mind. It was like, look, I know that there was Saudi interest from Musa last summer, and you have to imagine that we're not even 12 months on, and the deal has now been completed, that interest never went away. That you imagine that the parties, at least at an agent level, would have stayed in contact through this entire time. And we barely opened the doors on pre-season, and he's already gone. So it looks like the Saudi interest has been there kind of all throughout his time at Villa. You imagine that they've stayed in contact, and so the Villa, you assume, would have had at least a percentage worth of knowledge that this could have been on the cards. And so I kind of, no one's been caught by surprise by this deal. But yeah, it's interesting that in Douglas Luiz was a sale that I think Villa fans, it's okay to say that we were a lot more aggrieved by. No, it's not something to shake a stick at, though. I think a lot of people will be surprised to see it was that high. Obviously, recency bias is a powerful thing in football. Movies had. I saw people saying he lit up the Premier League in his first few months, and I think that's a little hyperbolic. I don't think like he was tearing the place up, but what he did do was have a much better initial start to life in England than someone like Leon Bailey had. But a few injury niggles started to creep in. This was a bit of a disjointed kind of winter through spring, and then really kind of struggled towards the end of the season as kind of Leon Bailey locked down one flank and kind of rotating other players. Giddy played quite high, and Yuri played quite high, and never really, he tried to play in that role of Holte, and just never really kind of found what was some pretty good form in the first half of the season. That's a decent chunk of goals and assists that you imagine we had to replace. But I think the most disappointing thing about this is that if we're looking at Leon Bailey's trajectory, that you imagine there was a league coming, right? That next season it was going to get better, and all of a sudden, the kind of this season would make sense, and it was just going to be building blocks, and all of a sudden, the kind of Musa Diaby of, not even just 24, 25, but maybe, 25, 26, 26, 27. Those seasons would have been just taking leaps after leaps, and we would have seen the potential that maybe he kind of best produced in the Bundesliga. It is a shame to kind of see his talents go to Saudi Arabia. He's someone that you kind of imagine at his age will be back in Europe within a few seasons. And it'd be interesting to kind of see where he lands and for what fee. But, I'm aware that, he's got a big support network around him. He's got a lot of family that, came with him to England and that he'll continue to support. And so the kind of source of it's about pouring him 50 grand a week or something like that in Saudi Arabia that obviously we can't compete with. And so I think you just kind of have to be thankful to these players that, they helped us. There was some very valuable goals and assists on our road to, a European journey that none of us will forget in a hurry, and Champions League football, and he contributed massively to that. And so it's with a doff in my hat, I'll say farewell to Musa Diaby. But in terms of tugging on the heartstrings, it doesn't really come close to when Dougie left, to be honest with you.
Yeah, absolutely. And yeah, you're right. We should totally look at that. This guy should be someone who's remembered for his contributions in, what has been the most exciting season, certainly in our lifetimes, mate. But I think as well, important to note, as you said, there was that Saudi interest before. He's, a practicing Muslim. Obviously, Mecca, which is the holiest place in Islam, is a city in Saudi Arabia, I do believe. So I'm sure, aside from the 400 grand a week, the fact that he was going to be sort of closer to his sort of religion and spirituality and all that probably played quite a part in it as well. And obviously there's the pull of, I believe Laurent Blanc is the manager of Al-Ittihad, Karim Benzema's there, so his fellow countryman, and I believe fellow Muslim in Benzema. But yeah, obviously that's a pull that only he will understand. And I wish him all the best. Fabrizio Romano saying it is 60 million euros. So yeah, essentially doubled our money. So I don't think we can really complain at that. And it definitely gives us more sort of cash in the bank to play with. As does the sort of next outgoing departure. It's not even a departure yet. This has sort of become a bit of a saga, really, hasn't it, mate? With Jhon Duran. I understand people's frustrations. Mainly because I've been extremely frustrated by this whole ordeal myself, because Duran is clearly an extremely talented player. But, for all of the alleged fuss that there has been, we've kind of spoken about the allegations before of him smashing up some lights in his apartment, or there was even the incident where he sort of crashed his Porsche, I believe it was, on the way to a Villa game. It definitely got sort of Balotelli 2.0 vibes from Duran, both on and off the field, in regards to, extremely talented but potentially very tortured mind. There was some quotes that sort of came out over the past day, weren't there, mate? Not only from Duran, but from his agents as well. Duran was quoted as saying that my name is being mentioned by such big teams is very important for my career. I'm happy that there are these rumours, and let's hope that something concrete happens. And naturally, everybody has sort of piled on him. And again, I get it, but this is my take on this. At least I'd love to know your thoughts, mate, and obviously the people in the comments down below. This is a child who has essentially thrown an 18-month tantrum since, sort of coming to the club. And, you've spoken before about, the way McGinn sort of spoke about him in a couple post matches. It was very, it was kind of considered, but it wasn't at the same time, was it, mate? There was some veiled criticisms thrown in there by McGinn. Those quotes I can't remember off the top of my head, but he essentially,
I think he called him a nightmare.
And again, that's not veiled, really, is it?
It wasn't jest. It wasn't jest. I think it's important to mention, but yeah, I mean, you don't hear that.
No, it's not very common at all. But I think I certainly do sympathise with Jhon in the fact that it seems like the people around him clearly do not have his best interests at heart, or maybe they do and they just aren't aligned with the reality of his situation. There was obviously the Chelsea links, mate, and you can understand and you could almost forgive most players for wanting to join Chelsea. Obscene bag, living in London, West London specifically. Yeah, things aren't great at Chelsea right now, but I'm sure growing up in Colombia, he was, well aware of all of Chelsea's recent successes, probably more so and a much more acute knowledge of Chelsea than Aston Villa. So, I think that's something that we should first concede. It's totally reasonable. I find it crazy, however, how he's working for West Ham. Again, no disrespect at all intended to West Ham, but when he has the offer of Champions League football, of semi-regular minutes, he scored 2 goals in the Conference League last season, 5 in the Prem. Clearly, so much potential, so much ability. He just needs the right manager to sort of unlock it. And I think, again, it seems like he's been at loggerheads with Emery in regards to game time and all that. But this just a lot of the criticism of Duran, it just doesn't sit right with me. And I sort of say that as somebody who has directly dealt with players' representatives and, I must add, good players' representatives as well during my day job, people who genuinely have the best interests of players at heart and, whilst working with them at times can be a fucking nightmare. I would like to think that in the sort of small interactions and clips that I'm seeing of Jhon Duran's agent running his mouth seemingly every 2 or 3 months, I do not believe that this guy has his best interests at heart. And we're kind of at a point now where the relationship just has to end, in my opinion.
Mate, to be honest with you, I feel like there's not much more you can add on this, is there? I think you've spoken very, very well there indeed, mate. My honest sentiment here, it's just a sad, sad state of affairs. It really is. It really is. I do feel, if he's got people in his ear that, seemingly kind of had his ear for the entire time that he's been at Villa and kind of what this could have been for him. And had some really, really good moments last season. 8 goals in, I think, 49 games doesn't exactly kind of jump off the page. But it's funny, we just spoke about Musa Diaby, right? Is that his kind of best moments in a Villa shirt, what the Musa Diaby moments that we'll remember, kind of in a moment or two to think about. You're probably thinking the goal against Wolves maybe, or Ajax at home. I think obviously his first goal was Burnley away, which was a good one. But none of them even come close compared to what, the goals that Jhon Duran gave us. Obviously that brace against Liverpool, the goal at the Etihad. Jhon Duran had some really, really big moments for this club. And had, let's not forget, the relationship that he was forming with the fans at one point. He would come on and give it his all. And, when he got that first goal against Everton, we were so happy for him because it had been a long time coming. Obviously, he went the 6 months after he joined. He finished that season without a goal. He scored a goal this season. Let's not forget an amazing goal against Crystal Palace. And so he kind of had these big kind of legacy moments that had set him up for a really big kind of second full season. My main gripe with this deal, mate, is that we have West Ham away first game of the season.
Yeah.
And if there's one thing that I have learned in my time supporting Aston Villa is that you can bet your mortgage on a Jhon Duran goal in that game should this move happen. But yeah, if he's desperate to leave and we can get a good fee, if we can almost double our investment, then absolutely we should, mate. We are currently the highest spending club in Europe, but I think we're doing a fantastic job of balancing that out with some very, very big sales. And if this is another one, and it opened the door for us to go and get another truly world-class player to play alongside Ollie Watkins, if indeed that is the intention, then all more for it. And I honestly, I do genuinely wish Jhon Duran all the best. I just wish this situation had been handled a little better. But I actually place very little of the blame at his door, to be honest with you.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, them 2 goals against Liverpool as well, mate, just phenomenal. He's given us so many moments. And it's a shame it hasn't worked out on his end, really. I know we sort of spoke, it's probably about a month ago, mate, when we sort of were discussing the Chelsea link, weren't we? And we were like if I were Chelsea, I wouldn't pay 30 million quid. And I think that really like perplexed people because like I mean I have his numbers up right in front of me, mate. I've got his FB ref profile. Aside from non-penalty goals, which is within the top 1% of, nothing stands out. And obviously that is sort of caveated with the fact that like the stats are warped because he's a bench player and he sort of comes off the bench. So per 90, his non-penalty goals, which obviously he scored no penalties anyway, is going to be within the top 1%. And the only other things that stand out are blocks, clearances, and aerials, all within between the top 14 and 1% on those three statistics, which again, something that is blatantly obvious in his games that we spoke about so many times. And, we've maintained this whole time, extremely talented player, but with all of the issues and the petulance that seems to come with him and all the off-field issues, that's kind of why we were like, if you're Chelsea or if you're West Ham, it is within your best interests to lowball Aston Villa like fuck, because like, it's clear, like Unai Emery and Aston Villa and Monchi, whoever it may be, does not see a future with Jhon Duran at the club at this current moment in time. So I think that's sort of, where we were coming from with that. Like, why would you pay 30 mil? We're getting 40 million for this guy. Oh my days, like that's insane. Like fair play Villa, but also like, if we are being completely honest, it is a fair reflection on the potential there is with Jhon Duran, but it's getting the best out of him, and I don't necessarily think that West Ham is the right place for that. But it'll be interesting to see. And as you say, mate, I'm loading up my Bet365 account after we end this podcast, and I'm sticking 100 quid on him to score against Villa, because why not? But no, it's interesting, and like to be honest, these two transfers to net 100 million euros from two signings like this is like quite big, especially when you look at the sort of some of the players that are still at the club. Like we've still got a lot of Gerrard era players. When you look at Dendonga, who's obviously been involved in pre-season so far, Luca Dean obviously had sort of been a mainstay really in the team over the past couple of seasons. But when you look at freeing up money off the wage bill or whatever, they're the two glaringly obvious ones that you would want to get rid of. There's obviously Diego Carlos as well. Many fans would probably like him to leave. So yeah, for us to raise 100 million from two players, that is quite remarkable. Yeah. And it will obviously assist us in hopefully signing maybe one, definitely not two, of these players that we're about to talk about, mate. I'm not sure if we've actually spoke about Nico Williams. We definitely did last year. I don't know if we have this summer, mate. I think it's fair to say this isn't happening, right? Barcelona have agreed a loan with a bank to get the money in to sign this guy. And I mean, I don't think, again, you can necessarily begrudge anyone for wanting to join Barcelona. But there's a few difficult sort of circumstances at play when it comes to Nico Williams and like signing him, mate, isn't there, due to the club he plays for in La Liga?
Yeah, I mean, real sliding doors moment, wasn't it, last season, when it seemed like we kind of dipped our toe into the waters of Nico Williams and were quickly rebuffed, it felt like. But the rumours definitely were there. And it's always so difficult to prize a player from Athletic Club because of the relationship that it has with Basque region, the kind of community that it fosters. Obviously had that fantastic Copa del Rey win and the scenes in the city, and to kind of be a part of that. And obviously he has family ties not just to the region but to the club. He's played with his brother Iñaki ever since he came through there, and Iñaki Williams is a player that could so easily have gone to so many other clubs kind of through his career, but has stayed loyal to the Basque region, to Athletic Club, and to kind of continue on that journey there. More often than not, when players leave, they get pulled back. And Herrera was kind of publicly speaking that he had and continues to have offers to go and play for clubs all around the world, but just can't bring it himself to like play for anyone other than Athletic Club. And I think it's only really when the kind of lure and romanticism of a Barcelona comes knocking that that's really the only club that you can kind of leave, and there are definite similarities between the two, given Barcelona's importance to the region of Catalonia, and kind of its stance politically and geographically as well, the kind of the region that they both represent in the north of Spain. It's one that, and it kind of feels the same as Julian Alvarez, right? In the kind of a player that we spoke about when he was at River Plate. There were River Plate fan accounts, I remember at the time, writing goodbye posts to Julian Alvarez, only for it to go quiet and then Man City to swoop in. And so, had those two deals gone slightly differently, we could have been looking at a very, very different Villa team indeed. But I think ultimately, like, just to be kind of competing in these circles is hugely exciting. I think it's great for the club that we've got that ambition and that we're not kind of ruling ourselves out of being in these sweepstakes. I think both of the players that we're going to talk about are the same, mate. I do think Nico Williams has probably passed us by, which is a shame. But just to see our club mentioned in those terms, I say is a win in itself, I think.
Absolutely, mate. Obviously, Lamine Yamal's been in his ear as well, but everybody saw Nico Williams' brilliance during the Euros. Just some headline stats: he's averaging 5.69 progressive carries per 90, 3.42 successful take-ons. He's averaging around 5.9 touches in the attacking penalty area, and he's receiving a whopping 12 progressive passes per 90. Almost everything goes through him at Bilbao, and he's just a phenomenal player to watch. 5 goals, 11 assists last season in La Liga. That is just over a return every other game, which is, phenomenal when you consider his age, a mercurial talent. And I think as excited as I am about this, I don't know not where he would fit in, because that's like a ridiculous statement to say. I'm struggling to imagine how we accommodate all these players that we've signed, mate. All the midfielders especially. And when you look at someone like Nico, he would obviously have to start. And there's almost been a reluctance to play with a left winger, hasn't there? Because, I've looked at someone like Leon Bailey. He's kind of he's been deployed on the left, but like his best position up until very recently last season has always been pretty ambiguous. But to have Bailey on the right, to have Nico on the left, and to have Ollie down the middle, that would just be absolutely terrifying, wouldn't it, mate?
Oh, mate, we can dream, and maybe this episode will come back to haunt us one day. But yeah, I think it's one where it shows that there is appetite to go and put in a signing like that, and I do think that's the main thing. I think it's not Nico Williams or bust. I think that we will bring a marquee, at least one. I think we can say maybe 2 marquee names in this summer, and so it just shows that the appetite really is there. And so you imagine that there's a whole series of players that we're kind of looking at and interested that they are in that wing spot is something that we're kind of looking to address. I always think there's definitely takeaways there. Is that okay? You can get this player, but definitely shows that the club are kind of looking for someone in that mold, and we'll get lucky eventually.
Absolutely, mate. Absolutely. Now, he's no Joao Felix, who has obviously been linked, and the sort of the rumours have only intensified over the past 48 hours. This is a message to all Villa fans. Can you all just grow up? Like, I'm sick of seeing tweets of people saying, "Oh, he didn't want us when we weren't in Europe, but now he did." That's how football works, okay? Reality check for you. Who would join Aston Villa when they're like 12th in the Premier League? Or, like, would you rather do that, or would you rather wait it out and then go and sign for fucking Barcelona, okay? The club he grew up supporting, one of the biggest clubs in world football. Let's not hold it against this man. He thought he was bigger than Aston Villa at the time, and he is right. And, I wholeheartedly agree with the sentiment that no player is ever bigger than the club. Joao Felix is a bona fide star boy, and it has been very tragic watching his career sort of pan out the way it has, mate. I know you can attest to this as well, as a devout La Liga watcher, as one of the biggest fans of Spanish football I have ever seen. You and I can both agree that the worst thing this man could have done when leaving Portugal is sign for Terrorism FC Atletico Madrid. This is one of Europe's most talented teenagers they had, who had the world at his feet, and he chose to sign for 8 men behind the ball who fit long counter-attack FC. Talk about poor representation.
You're absolutely right. You are absolutely right, mate. It felt like a weird deal at the time, and so it proved. But the player that was at Benfica is... I've never sometimes you kind of see these players and there's a player going through, I think we were all convinced, that year that he won the Golden Boy Award, cleaned up kind of a major award ceremonies in Portugal was he took Benfica to a league title. To then go to Atletico Madrid felt a little kind of peculiar, but yeah, I mean that season to get 20 goals alone with a haul of assists before moving to Atletico Madrid, and it's not without representing. He did win Atletico Madrid's Player of the Year award. There were only his final season, which was cut in half, where he was on track to reach double digits. He hit double digits in goal contributions in 2 of his 3 seasons at Atletico Madrid. In the one that he didn't, he got 9. And so, whilst it felt like an unsuccessful move, it was unsuccessful in the context of the player that we'd seen before. And you see this a lot, right? Whereby if you actually break down the numbers, by and large, didn't actually have too bad a time at Atletico Madrid. It's just he didn't hit the heights of what we'd seen previously. Obviously, there was that move to Chelsea, which was an interesting one. There are moments, I think his debut at Craven Cottage, he looked absolutely phenomenal. I think he got sent off in that game. But there have been real moments of class, and those have continued in this season's low spell at Barcelona. Has potential at 24 to still go on and hit the heights that we saw from him as a teenager, which were genuinely incredible. Genuinely incredible. I cannot really express what a coup this would be for Aston Villa. This would be the most gifted football player that we would have signed in our lifetimes. I do believe that. I think even when you put that in the context of a Coutinho, the kind of ceiling that Joao Felix had and continues to have is something that we should all be clamouring for. And the one thing that we've been saying this whole season when we've spoken about Champions League football is, imagine the players that we'll be linked with. And so we kind of then go and turn our nose at a player who has been convinced on those very terms just a few months later. And so, yeah, honestly, I urge everybody listening to this podcast to get behind this signing, because not only do I think that he is a fantastic player, I think he would fit wonderfully into that system, into that role alongside Ollie Watkins. He's not an out-and-out 9. He is that kind of between a 9.5, if you will, that kind of plays between a 10 and a 9. I don't know if false 9 is not in the traditional sense. His position, I think, has been a problem for him a lot in his career, but I don't think it would be in this Villa system. I think there is a role perfectly carved out for him. I think when you kind of compare him to a Kai Havertz, I think he positionally plays a very similar game to Joao Felix. I think you can kind of imagine just what that would look like alongside someone like Ollie.
Absolutely. He's kind of like a dying art, really. Like these sort of second strikers, 10 come 9.5, as you say, mate, don't really exist anymore. And it's sort of a unique circumstance that we found ourselves in a position where obviously Diaby is now out. This is the position that he predominantly occupied in the side, and it is like the perfect thing for Felix to sort of come in and take the reins on. Hard to believe he's still only 24 years old, mate. I mean, when you look at the numbers. Last season he got 10 goals, 4 assists across all competitions. I think again, like you sort of look at that, maybe it's not the best return, but wasn't it a great year for Barcelona? And there was obviously the sort of immersion of Lamine Yamal, who kind of really sort of stole the star at Barcelona. And phenomenal player, obviously very high ceiling. But Felix is somebody who thrives in those sort of half spaces, very good link-up play, and technically is wonderful. Like, he is a player who possesses the ability who could win the Ballon d'Or. I'm not saying he's like anywhere near that at the moment, but technically he's just a marvelous player to watch. And he's also the type of player who, if this signing is to happen, and obviously it is, as we talk about it, starting to look even more like a real proposition that he could be joining, everybody needs to be behind this guy. This guy needs a home. This guy needs to feel loved to play his best football on the biggest stage. And I know, for a fact that Villa fans will get behind this if this happens, but just to sort of shout to the back of the room, because this guy is, when you talk about generational, he's almost there. And
yeah, no, absolutely.
It could genuinely transform our fortunes, mate, couldn't it?
Totally agree, mate. I totally agree. This is just the beginning.
Absolutely. That's it. And as well, I feel like, although he is like a bona fide superstar in his own right, I feel like this doesn't take away any of the shine from Ollie Watkins. As we've sort of debated so many times, mate, with Ings and Duran, how important it is for Ollie to be the main striker. Felix is the main second striker, and that's the perfect role for him, really. But guys, you'll have to let us know your thoughts on this deal in the comment section down below. And everything else we've talked about, obviously Diaby, wish him well. And if you haven't already, make sure you guys subscribe. That way you will never miss a podcast from us here at Heart of the Holte. So yeah, like, comment, subscribe, and up the Villa.